My first marathon was nearly a disaster, but because of that, I took my fueling a lot more seriously. And in today's video, I really want to share my first marathon experience so that you could learn how to do things an awful lot differently than I did back then. It was my first marathon and it was London, and I was in my mid-30s, and I thought I knew how to conquer this mountain called a marathon racing. However, as Mike Tyson once famously said, everyone has a plan until they get a punch on the nose. And what I found was the first 13 miles flew by, loving every single minute of waving to my family at Tower Bridge, and then the Mike punch. It was about 16 miles. What was this? I suddenly felt absolutely awful. The following 10 miles were pretty terrible, to put it blandly. Actually, they were some of the worst moments of my life. So bad, in fact, that I got to the marker near the end that said 360 yards to go. This was, they didn't do it metric then. And I was not even sure at 360 yards that I was confident I would make it. And as I thought this, a runner clapped just in front of the 360 yard marker. And to this very day, all these years later, I mean, this was in my mid-30s, and now I'm nearly 60. I wonder if that guy even finished. Now, I finished the marathon in a not too shabby time, thankfully to my first half. I think I finished in 3:45. But the feeling like not only had I been punched on the nose, but just about everywhere else I and Mike had chose to hit me. Basically, at about 16 miles onward, I had bonked, I had hit the wall. We all know the terms. The basic fact was I had no real fueling strategy at all. I was taking some jelly babies and I just ran out of fuel. Now look, I was a pretty fit runner. By my standards then, I'd done the training. However, ignorance, and dare I say, a certain amount of arrogance had been my undoing on race day. So as the years passed, and now I'm a running coach, this has become an obsession with my runners, so that their excellent work that they put in training is not ruined on race day with a bad pacing or fueling strategy. This is why I often have a pre-race Zoom call with my runners a couple of weeks before race day to ensure we have pacing and fueling strategy clear for race day. So, because the two are very much connected, which we're going to go through on this video. Of course, it starts earlier that in training, but let me share some essential tips to stop you from throwing away your hard training on race day with bad fueling. So, how do you avoid hitting that dreaded wall during a race? Well, first of all, this is a pacing strategy, but also ties in with fueling. Do not start your marathon too fast. When you train your long, easy runs, if you are doing them correctly, they should be conversational. If this is the case, you will primarily be burning a combination of fat and carbohydrates, depending on various fitness. We're not going to get into the woods about being fat burning here, but generally, it's a bit like a car running its engine at a fuel efficient level. If you train correctly, you become more and more efficient. Your engine becomes more efficient as a runner. And particularly at certain lower levels, you will burn more fat than carbohydrate. Good to burn more fat because you have more fat stores than you do carbohydrates. However, on race day, you go up a gear, using the car analogy, or two. And like the car, you use more fuel. That fuel will require more carbs. It's easily more utilized by the body, depending on the effort and your fitness. However, not going off too fast, it serves two masters. You control your running, and if your training has been correct, your carb usage as well will be less extreme. Now, I'm sure you're sitting there watching this video thinking, okay, Lee, what actually is too fast? Well, that will depend on many individual factors. But as a coach, this is one of the critical areas where runners could do better on race days. Very few runners, if left to their own devices, don't go off too fast. So it's something to be aware of. The fact is, many runners fail not because of a lack of training, but because of poor fueling strategies. So let's look practicing fuel intake while in training. this is another factor. Like many runners, when doing long runs, not to overload on gels when training. That is a big thing for me. The thinking behind this is that if a runner is running at the correct intensities when they train, then the requirement for top-up carb stores can be stretched. And you may not even need to take a gel if you're running 90 minutes or less, or until you've run 90 minutes. Now, I must stress that only if you're running a conversational rate and not exerting yourself too much. Plus, running this way at a conversational pace can help your body burn more fat. And as we have more fat stores, like I've mentioned, than carbohydrates, this can assist with the ability to run longer and faster, i.e. you become more efficient. However, this will not mimic race day, as I've mentioned. The intensity of your running and the demand for carbohydrates will increase on race day, as would be obvious. So with this in mind, it's crucial to train the stomach to handle fuel during exercise. Practicing the frequency and timing of fuel intake during training is more critical than the exact amounts of gels that you might take, which helps avoid gastrointestinal distress, well, that's a word, on race day. So for example, if your run is longer than 90 minutes, after 90 minutes, sipping on a gel after 90 minutes or over a period of time trains your body that you need this gel at specific points of running. And it also trains your stomach. Plus, remember, hydration is an essential factor as well, because this impacts on the stomach's efficiency in digesting. So be aware that you don't need to take as many gels when training. Utilizing them later on in a run, just getting your stomach used to them, can mean that your stomach gets used to dealing with them. So what kind of amount of gel should you take on race day? Like all recommendations, they are just that. A recommendation is that a human race is similar, but not the same. However, you have to find what works for you. So here's a guide. For amateur runners targeting marathon finishes between, say, 3 to 6 hours, 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour is generally the suggested range, starting at the lower end of this range and adjusting based on your personal tolerances and needs. Now, obviously, the caveat here is the longer you're running, the more there might be for different types of food. So if you're moving into ultras, some of what I've just advised there, you would have to adjust to have some sort of solids, something like that. And now look at the fuel types that you can use and how they're digested. As I said earlier, we are all different. Some runners do well with gels, while others prefer the intake of carbs to be in a liquid form or a mix. I like personally to keep my hydration and carb intake separate to be aware of the quantities consumed of both. However, as a runner, you have to experiment to weigh up this against finding a solution that delivers the energy you require without having, gastro problems or generally suffering from the dreaded bolt or hitting the wall. So you have to kind of use that experiment, and race day experience quite often helps with this as well. Now, finally, remember, one size does not fit everyone. All of the above has to be tested and tried by you. This is why training is so necessary. Plus, as you do more marathons, you can refine your strategy from the feedback you get from those marathons. The bottom line is there's no one size fits all, whatever anybody says on the internet. However, what is true is we don't have an infinite supply of carbs stored in our bodies. Without good pacing and a fueling strategy that has been rehearsed in training and implemented on race day, your performance and enjoyment of your marathon race day will be seriously impacted. So it's well worth dedicating some time to getting this right within your training and just trying out what works and what doesn't work, what feels right, what doesn't feel so right, instead of just turning up on race day and hoping for the best. If you're still trying to figure out what to do in your training, getting the correct intensities or formulating a race strategy, if you need help with this, you might want to consider joining my paid program, the Marathon Maximiser Foundations program. You learn over 8 weeks how to train to run further and faster without uncertain results or wasted miles. That is our paid program. If you're not ready to commit to that, we do a free 10-day workshop called the Marathon Maximiser, which basically looks at the way that you're training now and looks at ways that you can refine it so that you can get better training results, more consistent results, and you stand a much better chance of turning up on race day more confident and ready. If that's something that's of interest to you, there'll be a link somewhere below this video. Also, you can catch me on Instagram, look for Lee Boniface, and I do shorter and more immediate content if that's your preference. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and please, I do reply to comments if there are any. So please, if you've got any questions, just fire away. Anyway, bye for now.